are discussing BSOC 134 sociological methods. In our previous lectures, we discussed about inductive and deductive methods. Today, we'll discuss about comparative methods. What is comparative methods and how it is important in sociological research? Comparative methods or comparative sociology may be defined as the field which is concerned with systematic and explicit comparison of social phenomenon in two or more societies. See, it is according to the sociologist, many of the sociologists, including Emile Durkheim and Radcliffe Brown, thought that comparative method is the best method to study society. Only through comparative method you can study society scientifically. So comparative sociology is what? Comparative sociology is that field in which you compare the two or more societies, but that comparison should be explicit and systematic. A well-defined procedure should be there to compare two societies, to compare the phenomenon of two societies. Important thing of comparison method is a systematic and explicit comparison of social phenomenons of two or more society. This is what the comparative method is. Comparison is routinely used in testing hypotheses, and it can contribute to the inductive discovery of new hypotheses and to theory building. We discussed about the facts, theories, postulates in our previous lectures. What is hypothesis? Hypothesis is an educated guess. Hypothesis is nothing but the perception. It's an educated guess. So comparison is routinely used in testing the hypothesis, whether what your guess is, what your educated guess is correct or not. Comparative method is used to test the hypothesis and to develop the new hypothesis and to theory building. And on the basis of these testings of the hypothesis, we can build the theories. And on the basis of these theories, again we conduct the new researches, and these theories are the foundations of any of the research. We discussed about the inductive and deductive methods in our previous lectures. Comparative method refers to study of different types of groups and societies in order to determine analytically the factors that lead to similarities and differences. See, in comparative study, this comparative study should be systematic study, and on the basis of this systematic study, we can analyze from the data what the researcher collect, what are the differences and similarities between the societies and groups. It is very important to analyze the data, and then only one can compare. Right? When sociologists choose to observe only a part of the surrounding social realities, the choice always represents a comparison of selected phenomenon under observation in relation to other social phenomenon. When you choose to observe only a part of surroundings, when you choose only a certain part of a social phenomenon or the social realities, right, then you compare it with the same phenomenon of the other society, right? It should not be like that you are comparing one phenomenon of one society with other phenomenon of other society. That phenomenon should be same. Durkheim and comparative methods. Emile Durkheim, as all we know, it is because of efforts of Emile Durkheim we are able to study sociology as an academic subject. Emile Durkheim contributed a lot. Durkheim was the first to seriously use the comparative method correctly in scientific senses. He was the first one who used this comparative method, and according to Durkheim, through comparative method, we can study the society scientifically and scientifically as well as objectively, and we can conclude, we can reach to a conclusion. So he was the first one to use the comparative method correctly in a scientific sense. It is central to Durkheim's vision of sociology. According to Durkheim, to demonstrate that a given phenomenon is cause of another, we have to compare the cases and employ the comparative method. Durkheim believed, or Durkheim always said that there is a causal relationship between the phenomenon. That phenomenon is the cause of that one phenomenon is the cause of another, right? Current Siddhant, what I told you earlier too, that according to Durkheim, there is a causal relationship between the phenomenons, and we can study or compare these only through comparative methods. So, comparative method is very important according to Durkheim. Sociological explanations require the establishment of cause effect relationship. Cause effect relationship exists between the phenomenon, and to establish that relationship, the cause effect relationship between the phenomenon, the sociological explanation is required. Why it is happening, why, if certain changes is happening, or if society is undergoing a change, why, what are the reason behind it, why some phenomenon in the society is changing, why society evolves from one society to another society. There must be a reason, and for that you can explain that reason through sociological explanation. Since social phenomenon can escape the control of experimenter, comparative method is best suited for sociology. As society is constantly evolving, right? It is a dynamic, society is dynamic, not static. That this social phenomenon is not in the control of a researcher. It can escape from the control of researcher, and to study society style scientifically, there are these certain parameters which one should follow, and one of them is one should have control on the environment, but it is not possible in society because it is a dynamic aspect. Social phenomenon is dynamic aspect, it changes with time, with place, right? So according to Durkheim, the comparative method is best study for the sociology. When you compare one phenomenon of one society or a group with the same phenomenon of other society or a group, you can conclude what might have happened, or why something is changing, right? Durkheim was not in favor of methods advocated by Mills, but he was positively inclined towards the method of concomitant variation. Mill have given some methods, but Durkheim was not in favor of those methods, but he agreed to that concomitant variation of Mills. What is the concomitant variation? We'll discuss about this. It is possible to establish concomitant variation within the society with regard to a particular social current. Then it would be necessary to compare different societies or the same society at different time. See, Social currents, we discussed about the social current. What is the social current? Social current is nothing but the uh, um, uh, what the majority of particular society or group thinks, that is the social current, right? So it is necessary to compare the different societies or same society at the different time, so that you can understand about the social current of that society, right? You can study the concomitant, you can establish a concomitant variation within the society regards to a particular social current by studying the same society at the different times. You are comparing the same society, but you are comparing it at different times. Or you can compare two different societies. Comparison of several societies of the same species applies only to the phenomenon which originate during the same time. See, when you are comparing the several societies, it is very important that those societies should be originated at the same time. It should not be like this, like you are studying as a modern, you are comparing a modern society, one of the modern society, with some another ancient or the previous society. They must be originated during the same time. If you are studying Indian society, if you are comparing an a present Indian society, contemporary Indian society, with some another Asian, uh, say American society or Western society, then it must be originated at the same time. Contemporary, if you are studying a contemporary India, you must study or compare it with the contemporary Western society. Right? The most complex social phenomena can only be explained after most extensive historical and cross-cultural comparison is carried out. You can explain social phenomenon, complex social phenomenon, only when you explain the most extensive historical and cross-cultural comparison. Through cross-cultural comparison and historical comparison, you can explain the complex social phenomenon. So that historical methods or historical details as well as cross-cultural details are very important. We discussed about the historical details or historical data in our previous lecture. So how important it is, we already discussed about it. So you can mostly you can compare the complex society only by comparing, only by explaining the historical as well as the cross cultural comparison. In doing comparison, an error is made which leads to misleading results. People have compared society at different stages of their evolution. This is an error. How can you compare how can you compare two societies when they are at the different stages of their evolution? This can lead to an error. You can only compare, as I told you earlier, you can only compare the two societies which are at the same position, but they should be at the same stage of evolution. Prior to writing the rules of sociological method, Durkheim had sowed the seed of comparative method in his work, The Division of Labor. In the division of labor, he used the comparative methods, and then he wrote the rules of sociological methods. He used comparative method to study the change from mechanical to organic solidarity in society. What is mechanical solidarity and what is organic solidarity? We already discussed about it. So he compared the two. He applied the comparative method to change, to study the change from mechanical to organic solidarity. In primitive society, there was a mechanical solidarity when the people are less dependent upon each other, but it is because of community feeling. They were bind together. This is mechanical solidarity. And organic solidarity, organic so we find organic solidarity in modern society, where people are dependent on each other, more dependent on each other rather than the community feeling. It is because of their needs. There is a solidarity there. This needs bind the society together. So he used the comparative method ki how society evolved from mechanical solidarity to organic solidarity stage. He compared the legal system of various societies and showed that they differed according to how many laws were based on the principle of repression and restitution. He compared the society on the basis of solidarity as well as on the basis of the law. In mechanical solidarity, in mechanical society, there was a repression, law of repression, but in societies where we find organic solidarity, there is a law of restitution. So he studied how these laws evolved from repression to restitution. He compared the society of repression laws and society of restitution law. He took the relations between these laws as an index of type of solidarity of society. John Stuart Mill's method. The Kim didn't agree with this John Stuart Mill's method. What were these methods? The first method is method of agreement. What is method of agreement? Mill's rule of agreement says that if in all cases where an effect occurs, there is a single prior factor C that is common to all those cases, then the C is the cause of the effect. According to Mills, if in all cases which are under study, where an effect occurs, there is a single prior factor C that is common to all those cases, then C is the cause of that effect. That is, there must be one factor which must be responsible for that cause. If that causes or if uh, which is responsible for that effect in all the cases. Next is method of difference. What is method of difference? This rule states that where you have one situation that leads to an effect and another which does not, and the only difference is the presence of a single factor in first situation, we can infer this factor as a cause of the effect. If in if in a particular case, or if in a particular situation, there is it leads to the particular situation that leads to the effect, and in another situation which doesn't, and in both the situation there is a difference of one single factor, then we can infer or we can conclude that once that one single factor which was present in the first case is responsible for that effect, or that factor is cause of that effect. Next method is joint method. The joint method is a method of applying both the methods of agreement and method of difference. So application of joint method should tell us that it is the belief which is the cause this time. So in joint method, we apply both agreement method and disagreement method, and then we can conclude. The method of concomitant variation. The method of concomitant variation says that if across a range of situations that leads to a certain effect, we find certain property of the effect varying with variation in factor common to those situations, then we can infer that factor as the cause. See, if we study across a range of situation that leads to a certain effect in various situation, right? If there is a certain effect, and if we find a certain property of effect varying with variation in factor common to those situations. See, the variation that the we are finding that there is an effect in certain situation, a wide range of situation. But if we find that the effect is varying with variation, the effect is varying with variation with low variation, or in some cases it might be a great variation. In a factor common to this situation, then we can infer the concomitant, then there is a concomitant variation, then we can infer that factor as the cause, that there is a variation where there are certain situation and there are certain factors which are present in all these situation, but there is a variation, then we can say that factor present in all these situation is responsible for the effect, or that factor is cause of that effect. Next method is method of residue. According to method of residues, if we have range of factors believed to be cause of range of effects, and we have reason to believe that all the factor except one factor C are causes for all the effects except one, then we should infer that C is the cause of the remaining effect. If there are the certain situation, if there are the situation, and if there are many effects and there are the many factors which are responsible for those effects, or in other words you can say if there are factor they are, if we consider these factors are causes of this effect except one, then we can say that the remaining one which is not responsible for any of the effect is the remaining effect. C is the cause of the remaining effect. Redcliffe Brown and comparative method. That was about Durkheim and his comparative methods. Right? Now, Redcliffe Brown and comparative method. Redcliffe Brown, we discussed a lot about Redcliffe Brown in our previous lectures. The aim of comparative anthropology or sociology, according to Redcliffe Brown, is to explore the varieties of social life as a basis of theoretical study of human social phenomenon. One of the important tasks of comparative method is to look for the parallel similars. Why we do this why we apply this comparative method, or why we study, why we compare various society, just to look for the parallel similars. The next step in comparative study is to try and discover the diverse form that the opposition between the moieties of dual division takes in the actual life. First is to find out the similarities and to find out the differences. The expression of opposition between the moieties may take a different forms. One of the institution of the joking relationship is there, and the second is two continuing group in a social structure can be maintained in a relation in which they are regularly opponents. See, this the expression of opposition between the different group may have different form. Like he has given one institution as a joking relationship. This joking relationship is found in many of the society, present in many of the society. And what is joking relationship? Where one can uh, joke with one another, that is relationship between brother-in-law and sister-in-law is known as a joking relationship, right? So there are the certain similarities and the differences when you compare these relationships of the different societies. The second type, what he said is, two continuing group in a social structure can be maintained in relationship in which they are regularly opponent. See, this increases the solidarity. If they are the two groups or the two opposite teams who are playing football or the cricket, this is the second type of group or in a social structure, right? It can be maintained a relation which are regularly opponent, but it again plays an important role in this society. Next is, there is also a third relationship of opposition, which is a combination of agreement and disagreement of solidarity and differences. Right? The third combination is of agreement and disagreement, right? Of solidarity and differences. Weber's comparative analysis. What is now Weber? We discussed about Weber. Weber, Weber is one of the important sociologists. He has given the concept of ideal type. What is ideal type? Ideal type is nothing but the tool to study and compare the various phenomena of the society. We already discussed about the ideal type. So, um, the use of ideal types, which helps to conceptualize the research, identify and assess the cause, and also aids in explaining historical diversity, is very important in this method. See, Weber, according to Weber, what historical explanation or historical diversity or explanation as well as comparative method, both are important. So, according to him, this ideal type is very important, and it plays an important role in conceptualization of the research. This ideal type identify and assesses the causes and helps to explain the historical diversity and importance of this method. Ideal type is a tool, it helps to assess, to explain the differences, the causes, and helps to explain the historical diversity. Weber's work on religion illustrates the nature of his comparative method. As we all know that Weber worked extensively on religion. According to Weber, the capitalism is the result of Protestant ethics. It is because of the Protestant ethics capitalism arises, right? We discussed about this. Then he studied and compared the um, uh, uh, religions of the various society. He studied about the Buddhism, he studied about Hinduism, he studied about Protestant, he studied about Confucianism, right? And then he compared these religion, and then he concluded why there is a difference in Indian society or the Chinese or the Asian society and Western society. So he used comparative method and he worked extensively on the religion, and on the basis of this he concluded it is because of the Protestant ethics that Western society, the capitalism started from the Western society. He was interested to understand the reason for emergence of the capitalism in Europe, right? He was of the opinion that socio-economic conditions of many societies were similar to that of Europe, but capitalism developed in Europe. As I told you, to find out the reason for this, he studied some societies, but mainly India and China. He compared the society of India and China. As I told you, he compared the Hinduism, Buddhism, Protestantism, and Confucianism, right? And then he compared the societies like Western society, Indian society, and Chinese and China, right? And then He concluded why this capitalism started from Europe. Weber was looking for a unique factor that was applicable to Europe and not to other society that facilitated the growth of capitalism there, right? And then he concluded it is because of the Protestant ethics that capitalism that uh, capitalism started from Western countries. Now, debates on comparative methods. Durkheim attributed immense centrality to comparative method in his work, The Division of Labor. He compared he compared the various stratas of the society. He compared organic solidarity. He compared mechanical solidarity with organic solidarity, restitutive law with repressive law, and it considered to be a great achievement of the 19th century. But there was a division. Some were enthusiastic, while few were skeptical about comparative method. Although Durkheim was in favor of comparative method, according to him, it is important. It is you can study society scientifically through comparative method. But again, there were the two groups. There were a division among the sociologists. Few were in favor of comparative method, while other were not. French Boas was not convinced with the generalization made by the comparative method. He was against French Boas, one of the eminent sociologists, anthropologists. He was not in favor or he was against this comparative method. He was in favor of the historical methods. Boas was of the opinion that before making any kind of extended comparison, the comparability of material must be proved, and was in favor of comparison between neighboring culture. So according to him, that if you are comparing two societies or the two group, the comparability of material must be proved. It should not be like that as I told you earlier, it should not be like that you are comparing two societies or group who are at the different stages of evolution. So according to Boas, it is very important that the comparability of material must be proved, right? And you can compare only two neighboring cultures. You cannot compare the far existing culture with each other, right? So Boas was against this comparative method. He was in favor of historical method. Redcliffe Brown believed that the natural laws of society could be discovered with use of comparative method based on observation, description, and comparison of society as they actually existed. So Redcliffe Brown, as we know, that Redcliffe Brown was in favor of comparative method, and in his studies he used this method extensively. So according to him, you can apply this method or use this method on the basis of observation, description, and comparison of the society. He was in favor of system analysis and was focused on discovering laws related to structure and functioning of societies rather than to their evolution. He wanted to compare, or he was in favor to compare the structure and functioning of the societies rather than comparing the society on the basis of their evolution, right? Ivan Purchard acknowledged that importance of observation, classification, and comparison in some form or other, but questioned the achievements of comparative method. He was neither in favor of comparative method nor in opposed of comparative method. According to Ivan Purchard, he acknowledged that the importance of observation is important, classification and comparison is important, but he questioned about the achievements or the generalization of comparative methods. He was very critical to the statistical use of comparative methods. He was of the opinion that comparative method overlooked the richness of the context. When you apply the statistical methods, one overlook the richness of the context, and in society context plays an important role. We'll discuss about this context. They need to be treated with suspicions when statistical techniques are used, right? When you use the statistical technique, you overlook the richness of the context, and it is questionable according to Ibn Prachard. He favored, like Boas, small scale comparison than the large scale comparison, but had reservation even for this. According to Pritchard and Boas, you can compare society at the small scale. Small scale comparisons are okay, but if you are comparing societies at the larger scale or the larger phenomenon, then it is questionable, right? Murdoch's comparative method and the use of statistics. Murdoch used statistics. Murdoch studied 250 societies, which is a great number of 250 society, and he applied the comparative method and he used statistics to reach to the conclusion. Murdoch found comparative method as useful for studying culture. Murdoch studied the culture. So he used comparative method to study culture. He rejected the Gaussian culture, relativism, and historical particularism, which explored individual culture in their respective historical context. So according to Boas, historical culture is important, but Murdoch rejected it. He used data from many cultures and identified variables, coded the data for statistical analysis. With the method, he was able to establish universal generalization. Yes, he compared, he studied 250 societies, right? And he collected data from the various culture and identified the various variables responsible for the various cultural phenomenon in societies, and he coded that data, right? To analyze data, it is very important to code that data. He coded those variables and then he applied the statistical technique on that data, right? To reach to the conclusion or for the generalization of his result, right? So it is very important that if you are applying to generalize it of the result, it is important to use the statistical technique. But according to Evan Pritchard and Bosch and other sociologists, the use of statistical technique is not good. Why it is not good? Because it overlook the context. But according to Murdoch, it is important, and he applied the statistical techniques on his studies. In his book, The Social Culture, he was able to identify natural laws of social organization by means of cross cultural comparison. So he, by comparing the cultures of various societies, he wrote a book, Social Structure, and in this book he identified the natural laws of social organizations. On the basis of the data collected from 250 societies for describing family as being made up of parents and children, which is central to the social structure in all culture. So, in all culture, the family is the center of the society, and the constitute family consists or family is constituted by the children and the parents, and for this he collected the data from the 250 societies. Murdoch contributed significantly by using sampling and probability statistics in comparative research. What is probability statistic or what is sampling? Sampling is when you take few units from the population under study, that is the sampling. And probabilities, he used the probability sampling, he used the probability statistic. Probability is what? Probability is that when the chances of being selected as equal, anyone can be selected as a sample, that is probability sampling. Several kind of comparisons are possible. Comparisons can be made within the single culture system of units from a given time period, or units from a different time periods. So it is not necessary that you can compare the two different societies. Even you can compare the two. Even you can compare the same society at the same time or at the different time periods. Comparative method encounters many difficulties, and there is no consensus regarding the nature of it. The focus of comparison of whole society is to derive social laws, and it is the central focus of the method. Why we compare the whole society? The main aim is to derive the social laws. After comparing the various society, we can derive social laws. Why social laws are important? For the solidarity of the society, for social order, it is important to compare the whole society. So comparative method, let me summarize it for you before starting another topic. Comparative method, when you compare two or more groups or the societies or the same society at the different time, or for different for the different time period or a given time period, and then after comparing it, when you compute and generalize your result. So there are two types of the sociologists are divided into on this. The sociologists are divided on this. Few sociologists like Weber, Emile Durkheim, Murdoch, Radcliffe, Brown, according to this comparative method is important, and is important to study the society scientifically through this comparative method and to generalize your results. But according to another sociologist like Boas and Evan Pritchard, this comparative method is not, it is not good. You cannot generalize your result. They questioned about the statistical technique. Why they questioned about the statistical technique? Because according to them, when you use these statistical techniques, you overlook the context, and to study the society, it is very important to study about the context. Okay, so this is the comparative methods. Ethnomethodology, again one of the very important topics of sociology. Ethnomethodology, this is again a method to study the society. What is ethnomethodology? As I told you earlier, that Garfinkel is the father of ethnomethodology. But what is ethnomethodology? Ethnomethodology is considered to be study of common and everyday methods of practical actions and practical reasoning. It is nothing but a study of common and everyday method, when which those method which we apply or which we use every day. Common and everyday method, practical action and practical reasoning. Why we are doing this? There must be a practical reasoning behind this. And when we are taking some action, that must be practical, right? So it is the study of common methods, everyday methods, practical reasoning, and practical actions. A method, ethnomethodology is a method of sociological analysis that examines how individuals use everyday conversation to construct a common sense view of the world. Understand it. If it is very important to understand what is ethnomethodology, it is nothing but again a method of sociological analysis. The first part is this. Athenaeum methodology is a sociological analysis method, a method of sociological analysis. How it analyzes the society? It examines, in Athenaeum methodology, it examines how individuals use everyday conversation, which we do every day, to construct a common sense of the world. We develop a common sense of the world through everyday conversation. This is ethnomethodology, a study of a study that examines how individual use the everyday conversation to develop a common sense view of world. Is a study of how social order is produced in and process of social interaction. Social order is produced because of social interaction. So Athenaeum methodology is the study of how social order is produced through process of social interaction. When we interact with each other, there are certain laws and rules which is not written anywhere, but we do follow those rules and methods. Why we do follow? Because of social interaction, we form certain unwritten rules and laws which we follow, and this produces a social order. And this is the Athenaeum methodology, study of how social order is and produced in and through the process of social interaction. This is right, this is not, this is good, this is bad, this is sin, this is not right. So how is it written somewhere? No, it is not written somewhere, but through observation and through regular interaction, we made all these things, that this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad. And there is a social order, and everyone follows those rules and social order. This social order is formed because of the general interaction between the groups, or between the individuals. And the study of this is known as ethnomethodology. It was founded by Harold Garfinkel, a student of American sociologist Talcott Parson in 1950s and 1960. So he's the father of this ethnomethodology. Garfinkel is the father of ethnomethodology. It became popular with Garfinkel's test studies in ethnomethodology, published in 1967. Study in ethnomethodology is published in, it is a book written by, or a text by Garfinkel. The key assumption of this text was the production of observable social routine practices involves the local or situated use of members' method of doing such activities. This text is based on the assumption that it observes the social routine practices that we do in our daily life, and situated use of members' method of doing such activities. Methods are practices and methods of those practices. With respect to these methods, the mastery of natural language is paramount. Language, according to ethnomethodology, even language plays an important role in formation of social order. So those methods to perform those routine practices and methods for those practices and language is important. So it is important to study the language, the methods, and the our daily activities. Ethnomethodology conceives of language and social interaction as a part of process of social fact formation. Social facts are formed with through social interaction and languages. If there is no common language, how can we communicate? It is not possible to communicate. This is the basic requirement of communication. What are the basic requirements of the communication? We need a sender, we need a receiver, and we need a common platform, a common language. So to interact, the common language is required, and through this, through interaction between the individuals in a society through common language, is responsible for the formation of a social facts, and social facts are very important. Garfinkel's approach draws inspiration primarily from Emile Durkheim and Max Weber. He was influenced with Weber and Durkheim. The origins of this approach lie in Garfinkel's engagement with the thought of Talcott Parsons related to social action. Social action, Talcott Parsons has given this action concept. So, this approach, the origin of this approach lies or related with Talcott Parsons' social action concept. The engagement led Garfinkel to turn to the writing of Alfred Schutz. He was influenced with Alfred Schutz too. Seeks to apply the lesson of Schutz's phenomenological studies. Schutz is the father of phenomenological studies. Schutz's phenomenological studies to the problem of social order as discussed in the work of Parsons. Schutz has emphasized that need for sociological analysis to attend to and to be grounded in a way in which person as a member of society experience social life. Ethnomethodology is a synthesis of logico-empirical and hermeneutic dialectic tradition, the two traditions that are commonly considered to be mutually exclusive. From the first, that is, from logico-empiricism, it borrowed the notion of routine-based rational actions. Rational actions, who defined rational actions, who described the rational actions? Weber. So, from the first, it borrows the notion of routine-based rational actions. And from the second, tradition of commitment. Atheno methodology derives from the second tradition, commitment to study concrete scene rigorously, with the recognition that the researcher is reflexive participant, not a mere observer of those seen. That is what the phenomenology is. That researcher should be part of that scene. That researcher should not be mere observer. Researcher should be one of the participants. The first issue Garfinkel deals with is to define the area of interest of ethnomethodology. It is the study of methods by which member make sense out of their world. Right? What is ethnomethodology? It is that method by which member makes a sense out of their world. We observe the things and then we interpret and infer the meaning of those things. We make senses out what we listen, what we observe, right? Hence, it works with the view of social action. The emphasis is on the organization of perception, which results in action becoming meaningful. This methodology emphasizes on the perception, organization of perception. Because why it emphasizes on the perception? Because what we listen, what we hear, what we observe, it totally depends on perception. What we infer or interpret or analyze from our word, it depends on an individual. So it depends on the perception of the individual, which results in the action. and action becoming meaningful. The second issue to which Garfinkel attend concern is meaning and language. The first issue was area of interest, to define the area of interest, and the second issue is meaning and language. For Garfinkel, making sense out of a situation and giving ordinary language accounts for that sense are inextricably connected. Making sense out of a situation, how you interpret or infer from that situation, and then giving ordinary language to that situation is very important for Garfinkel, according to Garfinkel. Athena methodology thus represents a very simple idea. If one assumes, as Garfinkel does, that a meaningful, patterned, and orderly character of everyday life, meaningful, patterned, and orderly character of everyday life is something that people must work constantly to achieve. So, order, that is meaningful, patterned, and orderly character of everyday life. People must work constantly to achieve these things. Then one must also assume that they have some methods for doing so. If everyday life exhibits a patterned orderliness, a recognizable coherence, as Garfinkel believes it does, then it is not enough to say that individual randomly pursuing shared goals. If you are observing the orderliness, patterned orderliness, and recognizable coherence between the groups, between the individual, then it is not enough to say that individual randomly pursuing the shared goal. It is not randomly pursuing the shared goals. Then they will do similar thing enough of time to manifest trend or pattern of orderliness in society, an approach characteristic of Parsonian sociology. Then you cannot say that if you are observing that there is a coherence, a patterned, orderly, recognizable coherence, and an orderly pattern, and then it is not enough to say that individual randomly pursuing the shared goals, but they will do the similar things again and again to manifest that trend, right? To implement that trend to make that trend common, or the pattern or of orderliness in the society. And this is what the Parsonian sociology was. Garfinkel argued that members of society must have shared methods for achieving social order. Then they use mutual construct the meaningful orderliness of social situation. One way of understanding this is by analogy with the idea that in order to make sense by speaking in a language, we have to speak the same language, using the same meaning for the words and the same grammatical form. Another is with the idea that in order to play a game, we have to play by rules recognizable by other parties of the games as a rule of that game. So, common language and rules are important, right? Indexicality. What is indexicality? Indexicality is a concept which describes a property of language and ordinary talk. It describes the properties of language or ordinary talk. It refers to the fact that word may have meaning which holds true for all situation in which word is used. That is a dictionary word, dictionary meaning, right? But word also has meaning which relates to a particular situation in which it is being used. It is important. There is a dictionary meaning of each and every word, but the context in which that word is used is very important. the context of that particular situation is important. Indexicality then means that there is a particular code, grammar, or vocabulary used among people in a given region, right? We use a particular type of a vocabulary, grammar in a particular region, right? Like in, say, for in India, that our language changes in every 50 kilometers. So of that particular the people of that particular area uses a certain type of a code, grammar, and vocabulary, right? Any sentence is understood in terms not only of the literal meaning of its word, but in terms of the surrounding conversation and knowledge of people talking. So we should not take the literal meaning of each and every sentence in the word, but we should understand this. We should understood that sentence with context to the surrounding conversation and the knowledge of people, because our language changes after few kilometers, and in every region there is a particular vocabulary, grammar, and if you will go by the literal meaning of the words, then it could be a problem. Then according to this one indexicality, one should not go by the literal meaning of the sentences, but it should be understand in with context to the situation and the people. According to Garfinkel, a piece of talk doesn't just describe an interaction but also stands and indexes some meaningful feature of that particular situation. Indexicality refers to the fact that accounts and meaning in a situation are dependent upon the nature of that situation. Right? So, what is indexicality? It is the fact that accounts and meaning in any situation and dependent on the nature of the situation. We'll continue with this in our next lecture. That's all for today. Thank you very much. Namaskar.